So, welcome again. It's so nice to see everyone here today. And I was just thinking as that was all happening about how it really does take a village for things like this to happen. You know, there's someone doing the offering, and Chuck's doing the music, and Sandra and Juxta, and it's like everyone's doing something. So thank you. First, I want to note that the title of my message today, I had a small error in it. The title was We're All Bound by a Covenant of Generosity. And after I submitted the title and the blurb for the digest, I thought, you know, that looks kind of not quite right. So I went back and found the quote that I had taken it from Robin Wall Kimmerer, and realized it was meant to say we're all bound by a covenant of reciprocity, which of course generosity is part of reciprocity, but is not the whole thing. So, but that's what we're going to talk about today anyway. And I want to start with a couple of gratitudes. First, I want to thank Joan Chatty for contacting me a couple of weeks ago to let me know that she was listening to Robin Wall Kimmerer's latest book, Serviceberry, and she thought it would be a perfect theme for a November message. And I agreed. In fact, it would fit right into what I wanted to talk about. So thank you for that seed, Joan. And also thanks to Laura for contacting me to let me know that the sermon that Jane was to read next week actually shared many themes with what I'm going to share today. So thank you to Laura and Jane for being willing to pivot and choose another sermon to read. So I want to invite you to just take a moment to yourself and think of a gratitude that you actually feel right now, something that doesn't take too much effort on your part to feel. So our gratitude is an acknowledgement of gifts that have been given to us. And we receive so many gifts, and so many gifts that we receive from the natural world. Lately, I've been feeling so much gratitude for trees, the company that they give me on my daily walks, and also for the heat that they provide, which really lets me live in a climate like this. It's really quite amazing. So I'm going to use quite a few words this morning from Robin Wall Kimmerer and from her new book titled Serviceberry, Abundance and Reciprocity in the Natural World, which was adapted from an article she wrote for Emergence magazine a few years ago. And I want to use a lot of her words because I think she just so beautifully sings the praises of the gifts of the natural world in a way that really I can't do any better. So I just want to use a lot of these words of hers. And in this case, she's singing the praises of berries, the serviceberry in particular, which is an edible berry-bearing plant that most of us know, that's native to her New York State, but also to our Keweenaw. And you know this plant by one of its many names, which she lists in her book. You may know it as serviceberry, sugar plum, juneberry, saskatoon, shadbush, shadblow, sarvis, or the Latin species name that goes along with the genus Amelanchier. So Kimmerer writes, ethnobotanists know that the more names a plant has, the greater its cultural importance. The tree is beloved for its fruit, for medicinal use, and for the early froth of flowers that whiten woodland edges at the first hint of spring. We all know this, right? Serviceberry is known as a calendar plant, its bloom a sign that the ground has thawed and the shad are running upstream. Or at least it was back in the day when rivers were clear and free enough to support their spawning. The derivation of the name service, from its relative sorbus. In the rose family, the plant does provide myriad goods and services, not only to humans, but to many citizens. It is preferred browse for deer and moose, and I will add bear, a vital source of early pollen for newly emergent insects, and host to a suite of butterfly larvae, the tiger swallowtail, viceroys, admirals, and hair streaks, and the berry-feasting birds that rely on those calories in the breeding season. In Potawatomi, she says, serviceberry is called bozakmin, which is a superlative, the best of the berries, it means. Now, I looked it up in Ojibwe, and according to the Ojibwe People's Dictionary online, it's called gozigwakomin or ozigwakomin, where gozig means heavy. Perhaps this is a reference to the signature bent over branches in the summer when laden with fruit. But both words share that suffix min. And Kimmerer writes that min is the root for berry, which appears in many other Potawatomi words, berry words, including maize and even wild rice. And min is also the root for gift. In naming the plants who shower us with goodness, she says, we recognize that these are gifts from our plant relatives, manifestations of their generosity, their care, and their creativity. I have not earned, paid for, nor labored for this gift, she writes. There is no mathematics or worthiness that reckons that I deserve them in any way. And yet, here they are, along with the sun and the air and the birds and the rain, gathering in towers of cumulonimbi. You could call them natural resources or ecosystem services. But the robins and I know them as gifts. We both sing gratitude with our mouths full. Kimmerer goes on to posit that if our first instinctual response to receiving such a gift as this is to sing gratitude so quickly that our mouths are still full and hands still purple with berry juice, then our next appropriate response is reciprocity. We offer something in return. We keep the gift moving. Using her example of berries, we might keep the gift moving by sharing the berries, or sharing something we've made with them. We might keep the gift moving by caring for the plants, by pruning them or adding a mulch for fertilizer. We might keep the gift moving by volunteering to plant a native garden somewhere else, or tend to a native garden like the one we have here. I'm actually remembering that this fall, there was a native garden put in at the Keweenaw Co-op, and this sort of signature plant in the middle is serviceberry that was requested, and Kurt and I carefully took a serviceberry tree from our property after many days of rain, and it was quite a job. We used our snow scoop to move that plant over to the native garden at the co-op. As far as I know, it's still surviving and doing well. We might keep the gift alive, in other words, by doing any number of things, some of them rather creative. Maybe we write a poem or a song or take a photo. Thinking back to your gratitude now that you brought to mind at the beginning of this message, how might you or do you keep this gift moving? How might you or do you keep this gift alive? Keeping a gift moving is one of the tenets of the gift economy, as opposed to the market economy in which we ordinarily live, whose reliance is on a scarcity mentality and encourages a false individualism, a hoarding of and a personal accumulation of things to feel safe rather than sharing. Lewis Hyde writes in his book called The Gift that in a gift economy, giving and receiving is rather relational, not transactional. Giving is not an equal exchange, a tit for a tat. As a gift moves through the community, it also actually increases in value. But unlike interest in one's bank account, that increase remains with the gift. It remains in the community. In this way, Hyde says, the gift becomes an agent of social cohesion, leading to the feeling that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts and inseparable. We are all bound by a covenant of reciprocity. In Kimmerer's words, the gift economy nurtures the community bonds that enhance mutual well-being. The economic unit becomes we rather than I, and all flourishing is mutual. I love those words of hers. This is what it means to be bound together by a covenant of reciprocity. The word bound is an interesting one. I'll give it that. It might suggest this sense of like obligation or some kind of relationship that's against our will. But I prefer to think about this not as an obligation, but an acknowledgement of the reality of the entangled web in which we actually do live, sort of rather than pretending that we're separate and autonomous individuals. Thankfully, we live in this entangled web, right? Not by any particular merit or payment or membership fee. Our awareness of this entanglement causes our gratitude and our generosity and our sense of care for our community to flow. And it also awakens our sense of responsibility. What is my responsibility to this gift? What is my gift to this community? Kimmerer writes in her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, we are showered every day with gifts, but they are not meant for us to keep. Their life is in their movement, the inhale and the exhale of a shared breath. Our work and our joy is to pass along the gift and to trust that what we put out into the universe will always come back. Recently, I attended a Keweenaw Faiths United lunch. The conversation topic was gratitude. At each place on the table was a postcard. In the center of the table were a few questions around which dialogue with others would be based. Upon leaving, we were asked to think of someone for whom we felt gratitude and send them that postcard. Even perhaps like now, before leaving and forgetting. It turns out Miriam printed these postcards from one of her beautiful butterfly pictures. And while talking further with her on this theme of gratitude, she got to asking something like, where does gratitude show up in the UU faith tradition? I think what she was pointing toward in her question was, how do we as UUs reinforce our interconnectedness through regular or ritualized practices of generosity and gratitude? We identified the joys and concerns section of our weekly service as a place where we regularly, ritually acknowledge both the joys and the concerns. As I thought about it more, it occurred to me that gratitude and generosity are actually woven into the very fabric of this fellowship. As with all churches and libraries alike, this fellowship is operating on the gift economy. We show up, and we both receive and offer gifts. Together, we have the opportunity to create a community of care, to co-create a community of care, where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, where all flourishing is mutual, where the covenant that binds us outlives us, hopefully, and moves with our gifts from one generation right on into the next. I think that's a pretty cool embodiment of gratitude and generosity and reciprocity, actually. So I'll give Robin Wall Kimmerer the last words by sharing the context for the title of this message, which is actually from Braiding Sweetgrass. We're all bound in a covenant of reciprocity, plant breath for animal breath, winter and summer, predator and prey, grass and fire, night and day, dying and living. Water knows this. Clouds know this. Soil and rocks know this. They know they're dancing in a continuous giveaway of making, unmaking, and making the earth again. Thank you for your attention.